You are all set to start.
All right. I will go ahead and call this meeting of the Ordinance Oversight Committee on April 28th to order at 7 p.m. Mr. Town Manager, would you like to read the electronic announcement?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis, in accordance with Governor's new news, emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, the chair has determined that the town council's, the Ordinance Committee is authorized to meet electronically. The public is welcome to attend with certain social distance guidelines in place. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We're utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through Zoom, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following phone numbers: 646-558-8656, access code 911-702-5727, or by clicking on the following website address: https://zoom.us/j/9117-0252727. It's also being streamed live on the no, it is not. So it's not going on channel 13 right now. We did provide public notice and necessary information for the meeting. We gave notice to the public on how to access the meeting using Zoom. Instructions are provided on the town website, newmarketnh.gov. We're also providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with the access. If anyone has a problem, please call 603-292-1221. And if there is an event they're unable to access the meeting, we'll adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled for another time. Please note that if any votes are taken during this, it should be done by roll call vote. Also, please note the following guidelines. In an effort to minimize background noise, we ask all members of the public keep their microphones muted, and councils and staff encouraged to stay on mute when not speaking during the meeting. Additionally, we ask members of the public turn off their video camera or webcam unless they intend to speak during the meeting. This will help optimize network bandwidth. If you have any questions, please hit Alt-Y on your keyboard or tap the raise hand button on your tablet. No public comments more longer than 3 minutes. This is a public meeting. If any member of the public causes disruption to the meeting, that will not allow the meeting to continue. We will request that the chair temporarily recess the meeting so that the disruption may be addressed. We'll then inform the chair when the meeting may continue. If it's unable to continue, the chair may suspend the meeting for a later date or time. Once again, this meeting is being recorded. Following the meeting, a copy will be available for playback on newmarketnh.gov. That's it. Oh, then you have to do the roll call. I'm sorry. Just for the 3 council members, because the other members of the committee, we're just staff.
Understood.
Yep.
Councilor Brayback.
I'm here. I'm present and alone.
Fantastic. Councilor Weinstein.
Present and alone.
And I, Councilor Dumont, am present and alone. I'd like to thank you all for meeting here so quickly from our previous meeting. Obviously, the reason why we're here tonight is to discuss ordinance number 7. Before we get to that, there are a few items of housekeeping that we'll have to address. The first is the minutes for our meeting on February 18th, 2021. I'll accept a motion to adopt those.
I'll make a motion to adopt the meeting minutes from, what was the date? February?
18 February.
Thank you. From the 18th of February.
Fantastic.
Second.
Excellent. Did we have any issues, any questions, anything look out of place? Excellent. Tried to be as detailed as I could with without going word for word. In that case, we'll move on to voting. Councilor Brayback.
Aye.
Councilor Weinstein.
Aye.
Councilor Dumont votes aye as well. Those are adopted. And the second item is the meetings for the 22nd of March, 2021 meeting. I'll accept a motion to adopt those as well.
I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes. What day was it?
22 March 2021.
March 22nd meeting.
And I'll second.
Excellent. Were there any questions, issues, or concerns with these? Excellent. I did just want to point out there was one point in there where the meeting does sort of black out for a couple of moments. I don't think it was a lot that was lost, but there's probably a good 30-second chunk that was just not recorded on the live stream. But I did address that. It's at the bottom of the first page for folks who are curious. But seeing no other issues, we'll call the roll. Councillor Braybeck,
Aye.
Councillor Weinstein,
Aye.
Councillor Dumont also votes aye, and those are adopted. Fantastic. We'll move on to committee business. At the town council's most recent meeting, we discussed the ordinance number 7 as it was presented to the town council, as we had pushed it forward in agreement that it should be considered. It was sent back to us for further work. The town council did have comments that were made at the meeting. We did, however, also receive 2 specific letters. One was from Councillor Kuiper and the other was from Councillor Sanders, and that was sent out for prior review. I'll pass over to our town manager, Steve. How did you want to address this? We discussed possibly going line by line of the ordinance as it stands. Did we want to go through either of the direct feedback, or you're muted?
I say that's the wish of the committee. If you guys want to go through each one, that's fine. If you guys want to just address the concerns of the 2 councilors, we can do that. I mean, I had like 1 or 2 small things I thought maybe we could add, but other than that, that's the wish of the committee.
Understood. Well, in that case, then I'll leave it up to the committee to decide. Did any members of our committee have any immediate pressing feedback or comments that they wanted to share, edits, or anything in relation to what we had received from our 2 town councilors?
I mean, I think that it would make sense to go through those comments and just to address it.
Absolutely. Did you want me to read each one individually, or do you want to read one and go?
Would we want to go paragraph by paragraph and see if there's a, did they actually, I was just seeing if whether or not they put at what paragraphs are actually the issues we're in, but we could try to figure that out.
Councillor Sanders' email had several points. If you look through, it's just 0.2 banners, 0.3 tag days, 0.4 parades, etc. Councillor Kuiper's was a little bit more broad, but was tailored towards, I think, specifically an actual noise ordinance or something to have a measure of when it becomes too loud.
Okay. Why don't we try to go through and just see what match, we could see, okay, section 1, we know what, are there any issues on these 2, or do the committee members have any issues, and then go to the next one.
Understood.
Yep.
All right, let's do that. I guess we'll starting with section 130 under permits, number 1, solicit funds for charitable purposes.
No, and if I may, Councillor
Of course.
Sanders and I actually had the same thing about erect banners. I would say erect banners crossing public ways, because I think that's what they meant. When you go to some communities where they have a sign that says the Rotary picnic is this weekend, or something like that. That's what they usually license, not banners like on a building. It's more of the crossing a public way.
Hang on. Okay, sorry. I can't.
Take your time.
I have too many things.
Yep.
I couldn't get back to the screen. So the only thing that I would say about that, Steve, is that we also have those banners on the side of the light poles.
Or like
but
the
those
high school.
Those are municipal. Those are our poles. We wouldn't allow
Okay.
private groups to use those. Those are just to welcome people to town.
Okay. So that
Yeah.
wouldn't apply.
No, that's why I would say across public ways.
Yep.
Steve, I did have a couple of thoughts just on the document as a whole.
Yeah.
When I was rewatching our meetings to make sure that the notes were good, it seemed like we were more looking at a general licensing board specifically for the live events and live functions, mostly for the outside. Councilor Weinstein's amendment to the ordinance at the town council, I think, also looked to address that. And I think some of the feedback we had received from the town council was more aimed at, let's get something for that specifically without going a full, all 8 points. And I guess what I'm wondering is, before we really start going through in depth and perhaps representing the same document that the council might disagree with, should we maybe reconsider exactly what we are going to send to them? I don't disagree with the licensing board as it was presented. We had some questions. I think those could be resolved, but
If I may, the law is pretty specific. It does state who, if you want to license these things, who serves on the board. It states the mayor, a city employee, and then the police chief. If we want to just address and this is, I'd have to ask the attorney because I don't know, is if we just want to address live music or live outdoor shows, then this may get punted from us and go to site plan review. And that's why I was trying to figure a way to do this without having to go through the planning board process, just because of how much of an issue that would be. And so, go ahead.
It may work out better for us using the entire state statutes as opposed to just cherry picking the live events.
Let me rephrase it. I think we can cherry pick, but I think if you do the licensing, I thought you were trying to get rid of the licensing board.
No. It seemed like maybe there's a feel from the council that it should be aimed specifically for the live events for licensing and businesses that may want to do live events versus like the movie theater, the carnival, tent show,
and let me throw this out there too, because I know this happens in Dover. So if you want to like close the street for a block party or have a raffle or any of those things, instead of having a committee that does it, it actually has to go in front of the entire city council for a reading. So you have to wait for the council to meet. And that would be my concern, is if you don't have a committee that's nimble, then you may have to wait a longer period of time.
Okay.
So it may be easier just to have the licensing on with this situation for these, so we can react quicker versus having to wait for a council meeting. And in the summertime where most of these things are going to happen, we don't meet as much. So there could be, a month before we meet and then somebody couldn't have their event. So that's why I think we could tweak it, but I think it's more nimble to have a committee to do it.
Understood. I don't disagree. Councilor Weinstein?
Yeah, so just to weigh in on that piece of it, I completely agree. I think that licensing process is important, and I think a lot of those items actually make a lot of sense. There were a few, for me personally, that I had questions about. I think that all of the live items or outdoor items, which were most of those things, and I know that Councilor Sanders had a question about tag days. I don't think that's inappropriate. Like, I think that we should ask for permits. Will somebody always seek a permit? No, probably not. Just like the solicitation, will someone always seek a permit? No, probably not. But it does make a lot of sense to put that in there. And then obviously live shows. My only concern was really the indoor. I say live shows, I mean outdoor.
Yep.
My only concern was the indoor piece, and that trying to regulate that, I just have a hard time with. I just think it gets complicated, and as I forget who mentioned, if Crack Skulls has a like karaoke, not karaoke, but like a open mic night one night, like, or an impromptu sort of event happens, I just would hate to see people have a violation of some sort. I don't think it would be fair. So
I agree.
It sounds like it might make sense for us to go either item by item through the ordinance or note by note from the letters, just so that we're moving in a direction.
So we're on tag days, which Council Weinstein just mentioned, which is after, so number 2 is erect banners and would add across public ways.
Right, I think we just like skipped right past charitable purposes though. Are we making a
Solicit
decision
funds for
about that, or
charitable.
are we?
I mean, the reason why that's in there is because you want the good guys to make sure they're known as good guys, and the bad guys, if they don't get a permit, then usually they're, unless they made a mistake, which is fine, they're not going to get a permit, and we can say, no, they're not permitted. Don't give them money until they come see us. And then you go from there.
I think,
I think that's right. Yeah.
so I guess to Councilor Brebeck's point, there were some comments made at the town council meeting about, well, solicit funds. So does this mean Newmarket's going to try to police like GoFundMe's or related, which obviously we can't, but I
Right.
wasn't sure, would it help to maybe put some clarifying language in there, like solicit funds for charitable purposes, comma, whether that's, organizations trying to sell X, Y, or Z, like on a public space or something.
My problem, again, and if you remember what Chief True said, this portion is so we can say, yes, we know that somebody is trying to solicit funds in the town of Newmarket. Yeah, we can't stop it from GoFundMe. We know that. But we can at least say, you know what, this individual, they're trying to raise money for, a dog park, and they came to us, and yes, it is okay that they're coming door to door to ask for funds, versus somebody come in and just say, yeah, I'm trying to raise money for a dog park, and we know nothing about it. I think if you put it, again, and with any ordinance, the more specific you get, the more loopholes you put in. Because if you say it's only on public ways, well, okay, so I can go on a private street and request those funds, because that's not like a private neighborhood. We can't regulate that.
What would
But-
the consequence be then, though? Is there a consequence for not getting a permit?
Well, there's one of two. One, we give them a permit on accident. If it's a legit thing, I think
No, sorry, I'm saying a legit thing, it didn't get a permit and is going door to door. Is there
You
a
know, just-
consequence for them doing that without a permit?
we would call them up and say, hey, guys, you need to get a permit. Come talk to us. We give them a permit and just say, yeah, then after they become blessed because they've registered basically with the town, so they can say, yeah, no, we're a legitimate organization. If they're not a legitimate organization, they're not going to come see us.
Right. And then how does the town, I understand the reasons to do
Okay.
it. I just don't know if they're compelling enough to like over legislate, I guess, is what I'm worried about. Oh, I had another question.
Go for it.
Move on. I'll think of it.
Currently, there is a civil forfeiture if you're to go around town without a permit for certain things. They talked about the door-to-door salesman. If they don't obtain a permit, they can get a civil forfeiture that they would have to pay, or they could be summoned to court.
You would take all my Kirby vacuums I'm trying to sell?
Exactly.
We probably wouldn't seize them, but we may ask you to stop selling them.
I thought of my other question. So then what does this licensing board have a process for determining what is or is not a legitimate, registered nonprofit? And then I'm thinking about someone who's just raising money because Karen down the street is having cancer treatment and they're just trying to get money for it. Like, it just seems like to undue burden to put this on a licensing board
quite
to have to
honest,
research this.
I don't know how to explain this, but it works in every other community that they don't have this issue of Karen down the street is raising funds for breast cancer. Unless it goes big, then they do get registered and that kind of thing. And there's no way, nobody on this committee or board, I've never heard of it, any municipality stops any of these charitable organizations. It's more to just so they register with the town so they can say, yes, we're legitimate. Because you may not, again, we heard it from the chief last week. There's a lot of people who go out there, and senior citizens are always the big ones, that they'll try to raise money through them. Either it's I mean, I know we're talking about charitable ones right now, but it's also the, hey, I'm going to come and pave your driveway for X amount. Or I was doing a paving job up the street and I have this amount of asphalt left over. Do you want me to come do yours for $2,000? And those are not legitimate businesses or any kind of peddling or charitable things. That's the biggest concern. It's not, again, I think we're over, I don't want to say, like, we're not going to punish everybody for doing, if they're doing something legitimate, no one's going to punish them. We're trying to stop the people who are doing something wrong. And I think that's the key. We could go through this and you could come up with and this with any ordinance. And that's why I think one thing we always have to remember when we write an ordinance, there's always a but what or and if kind of situation. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess we can still go line by line, but you're going to end up with a 50-page document instead of 5. And then there's always a loophole.
Yeah, I feel like I'm not interested in adding more to this. If anything, I'm interested in taking things out of it. And I just think if we don't go line by line today, then we're going to do it next week.
No, I completely agree.
With more voices.
And my thought is this, I'm going to just sit back and let you guys, I'm not going to play devil's advocate anymore. I'm just going to let you guys do it. You make the decision.
Did you learn your lesson?
I've learned my lesson. I'm just going to sit here.
I just know that was one that was brought up a
fine.
lot last week. And so I don't want it to seem like we didn't consider those opinions that were voiced and just brush them aside. I guess I'm playing devil's advocate in that way of like making sure we're talking through the issues.
And again, I just want to bring up what the police chief, why he brought it up.
Councillor Weinstein, you've had your hand up a couple times.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, here's my question with that particular, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I do think that it's sort of a sticking point, because when we talk about soliciting donations, are we talking about the door-to-door donations? Because there's so many ways to solicit donations, right? And so when we talk about GoFundMe's or mail-in campaigns, I mean, I know that I get letters from lots of places that are not based in Newmarket, like, and I don't know, like, I understand and completely agree with the people who go door to door, right? And sort of are soliciting in that way. I just don't know how we regulate all that other stuff. So that's where I'm sort of tripped up on this.
I guess it might help to maybe look at like a real life example. The town of Newmarket lost a community member recently through a motor vehicle accident. It was horrific. Thankfully, the community did rally around and raised quite a bit of money. And I don't think anybody actually went door to door to do that. It was all conducted online. So when you use the example of, Karen so-and-so who gets cancer, we want to help her out, help her family out, or John lost his leg due to an accident. Most of these things now are happening not necessarily in the physical world, they're happening digitally because it's easier to reach a lot more people that way. Is there something maybe we can do where it talks about the like actual physical acts of solicitation? So going through knocking door to door, where we do have people on, on property in the confines of the community versus, receiving letters. I get 100 pieces of junk mail a week that I just go right in the garbage, but we can't regulate federal post, Feel free to chime in.
I agree. I think that that's sort of the sticking point for me. Like, what are we talking about regulating? Maybe that's what I'm not 100% in understanding of. Like, I just don't know if it's because, like you said, like we're not regulating every GoFundMe. We can't. I think that's an undue burden on the police department to try to regulate that.
It is, and I think that there's a morality question there as well. Versus, go ahead.
It just sounds like it's not so much about like getting a permit. It's more of creating a process for like letting the police station know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. It sounds like that's more of what it is. Does that? That differentiation for some reason makes sense to me. Permit sounds like something, if you don't have it, there's a punishment. And it sounds like really it's more about like letting the police know what's going on, protecting consumers so they have somewhere to call and check up on things.
Lieutenant Jordan.
I do think that that is part of it, that we're just trying to have a process where people can sort of check in with us and have the knowledge if there's a group going door to door every year for like Halloween, they do like a can drive or something. I guess that's a bad example because on Halloween they go door to door anyway, but I think that is what the idea is, that if the specific groups are out there, that we have a way of letting the public know, yes, this is legitimate, or no, they haven't checked in with us, we've never heard of them before, and I would do some homework before we go further. But I think that that with this ordinance we may get a lot of things covered, but I don't think you're ever going to get everything covered, and I think it would be impossible for us to do that. And I certainly think the GoFundMe thing would be impossible. I don't even know legally where it's done online what the procedure would be for that. So,
Steve, do you think there's a way that we could get write language for physical or in person or door to door specifically versus a collection can of Johnny Boston's or Cracked Skulls? Or
And again, I no, well, to be honest, those are one of the bigger ones too, is the collection cans. You want somebody to come in and say, yes, I'm a legitimate person collecting money. You don't know where the money goes after you put the money in, and somebody comes in and collects the can. There have been cases where somebody puts a gumball machine, and it says for charitable to I remember the March of Dimes was the long time one or whatever. And you would go in and ask, does it actually go in there? They're like, no. So those are the kind of things that you gotta, and again, I agree with Lieutenant Jordan. There's just too many things that if you don't want to, there's just too many things that we could miss.
I get that, but I guess going door to door and asking somebody to buy candy bars that'll be delivered in 3 days' time and asking an exorbitant amount for an organization we might not, know is legitimate versus somebody making a choice to throw a couple dollars into a can. I mean, the difference there is, it's a private business, and I'd say it's up to the business owners and operators to be more discriminatory about what they allow.
You could always put solicit funds door to door.
Okay. I mean,
that's the wish. I mean,
if that's okay. I mean, that might help allay some of the concerns of the town council, and maybe perhaps better allow the police department some more direct examples of things to enforce and look for. Is there a disagreement with that?
I don't necessarily disagree. I am curious, at that point, if we're only saying it's for door to door, how much door-to-door solicitation happens?
And that's why I said if you go more specific, it's going to be specific. So if somebody's on the sidewalk soliciting funds, that's not door to door. And again, that's why we're going to be here all night, because it's going to always be a what if situation.
So every time we draw a box,
exactly, you're going to keep something out of the box.
Okay. This is what they fight about in the state houses and in Congress.
Exactly.
All right. I guess,
Zach, your connection is getting a yellow and red bars. So I don't know if you're wireless or. Okay, just to warn you, your internet connection is.
Hang on just a moment.
Okay, you're fine now.
I just shut off 4 things that were connected to it. Okay, I guess perhaps solicit funds for charitable purposes might be a sticking point. I think that there are some other items here that might go a little bit quicker if we want to move on and discuss them. That way there we can check them off and head back to some of the harder areas after. I think we had an agreement on point 2, erect banners. It was banners crossing public ways, blocking public ways.
Crossing.
Across. Okay. This would
or actually should be above.
Okay. So this wouldn't affect like Big Bean if they put a banner outside their building, as long as it wasn't going
Not
across
on
the
the
mills.
sidewalk. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Nobody else has any comments or disagreements there? Perfect. All right, we'll check that one off. Steve, are you jotting down the language?
I am.
Thank you, sir. We'll go to number 3, tag days. Did we have much feedback here? I believe Helen just asked, how is this different from a charitable purpose donation solicitation? And I'm not seeing anything in John's comments. Okay. We'll check that one off. Move to number 4, conduct parades or processions, festivals or races, walkathons, public demonstration or protest on public property or highway.
So for everything but the public demonstration, we already do this.
Okay.
It's just not a formal, like the Great Bay Half Marathon, they come to us, we sign off on it, they move on. So it's already done.
Okay.
Just,
Go ahead,
Um,
please.
so I know I asked about this when we met the last time, just because, you know, the concern being if there's some impromptu vigil or, you know, who knows what, but, and that is certainly a concern. And I feel pretty strongly with our current town administration and current police administration that that would not be an issue. My only concern is, you know, 10 years from now, or, you know, in the future, if that was a case. But and just to backtrack, and not that I'm trying to argue both sides, but I also see the importance of something like this, because I do completely understand that it's a way to regulate any other, you know.
Right, well, I'll just say the perfect example of this would be Charlottesville.
Right, exactly.
That's you got to remember, if you let one do it without a permit, you have to let everybody do it without a permit.
Right.
And you could be setting it up for, you know, very dangerous things. I mean, you're right, the impromptu vigil, if anybody, not me, not, you know, a town manager or police chief 20 years down the road, doesn't have the common sense to determine what an impromptu vigil versus a, you know, a danger to the community, then they shouldn't be in the profession. Period. End of sentence. I mean, I will say that I think any, you know, even listening to people going through this year, in my profession, everybody knew that that was the right thing to do. There were, unless it truly got violent or there's safety issues, nobody ever stopped an impromptu vigil or protest. They probably made it more safe. So yeah, I mean, that's the big concern when we discuss public demonstrations. You're right. We're thinking about what some may consider the good guys, but you got to remember, when you consider the good guys, you got to consider your bad guys too. They have just the same right, so they could come down the same time and do the same thing. So and if there's no way to, I mean, except for public welfare, you know, this way at least you can make it orderly.
I mean, I think a good example for that, you know, good side, bad side, or not necessarily good or bad, but the opposing point of view is, I think it was Boston had a straight pride rally
Right.
a year or so ago, and it was in response to all the gay pride rallies that were going on. And I mean, they still had to go through the normal clearances that they normally would, and arguably it was made a better, safer environment. I still know people who got maced down there, but you know, those are for other reasons. But having the police on scene, having the town, you know, city officials knowing that there was an event happening, even though they may not have agreed with the arguments behind what they were there for, it makes sense to have that involvement. You know, I personally don't know, you know, of any language that I would want to propose to change this. If there are no other comments, then we can move on to point number 5.
And that one we already amended.
Yes, that one has Tony's language in there.
Yep.
That was the outdoor live music shows and other amplified outdoor music event language, but I don't think there were any other substantive changes.
No.
All right. Movie theaters, I don't think we really need to discuss.
And that's more of a, annually, we can have a reason to go check on it to make sure.
Yeah.
Because like when you go in, you don't want the cloth on the side of the wall falling down or that kind of stuff. We can ask the health inspector, building inspector, hey, before we issue their license, they okay? That kind of situation. But again, we don't have one yet, but.
Yeah. Are movie theaters radically different than music venues like Stone Church or dance venues like Rockingham Ballroom?
Not really.
Okay.
And again, that's one of the reasons why the licensing was there for both, is so you could go in and check to see if the safety things are in place annually.
Mhm.
I asked that, and I was asking some communities how they do it, and there's two things that one of the ways they monitor it is how many complaints have we gotten in a year from this facility, and whether or not we should. And this happens a lot in other parts of the country with liquor licenses. But you can license live entertainment this way. They say how many complaints, if the police have had, 500 complaints or fights or issues like that, then you may want to consider, checking on their entertainment license
Mhm.
versus, it's not just to try to get the money out of them. It's actually to review annually. The other one was, like I said, it was life safety. So you can have a chance to say, hey, what kind of, are they up to code? Has anybody gone in there before we issue this? And they just review it that way.
Let's see. Assuming no comments, we'll go to point 7 then. Temporary closing of any town street for the purpose of community-related or private events. Certificate of insurance in the amount of $1 million acceptable to the town that names the town of Newmarket as an additional insured. Licensing board at its discretion may require additional conditions at no cost to the town to include but not limited to a higher insurance binder amount, police or fire details, or other measures to ensure public safety.
And
this is one that I think had more feedback.
Yeah, and I saw that, and I don't have an issue. I would say may instead of shall be required, because you're right. The block party may not need the $1 million rider, but if I'm having the marathon, they're gonna need they're gonna need their insurance.
Yeah. So when we look at this, I guess from a standpoint, if I wanted to throw a block party with my community, so there's an apartment building here and there are 4 across the street, what would that be for us then? That's just coming down saying, hey, I live in Cherry Hill, the residents want to have a party. You give us a piece of paper that says party's okay.
Typically they go to the police.
Yeah.
Police then circulates the request amongst some department heads and say, are there any issues?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll say yay or nay, and go from there.
All right.
But there's no formal review for block parties.
Okay. Then I guess to Councilor Kuiper's point, additional requirements like porta potties, police detail fees.
Which, again, I go back to my statement that if you have an administrator, a manager, or a chief that can't tell the difference between a block party in a neighborhood and an old home day, then that lies on the issue with the person. My initial thing, and I was gonna put this in I was gonna recommend it at the beginning, is why don't we have an appeal? If they don't like the appeal, they don't like the decision of the licensing board, they can appeal it to the town council. I think that solves 90% of these issues.
Yeah, that makes me feel a lot better. I
So-
think one thing I worry about is, like Tony said, the 10 to 15 years from now, someone does have that judgment where maybe they're discriminating against a specific community and not letting them have their block party, and allowing kind of personal bias to get in there. I like that there's like a balance to that there's another person you can go to. It doesn't just stop there.
Right, but I still think you need to have that line in the licensing board at its discretion.
Mhm.
May I have additional conditions, because it's again, if they don't know the difference between a block party and a marathon and an old home day, it's the old saying, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. You know what it is. You just you gotta give some leniency in there.
Lieutenant Jordan, I saw your hand go up a couple times. Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I just was going to say that I certainly understand the concern. I've been a police officer in this community for the better part of 20 years, and there are very rare circumstances where we've, made people get details or have a police officer present. I can think of high school basketball games as some of those ones that we came to an agreement with the school, and obviously the marathon that's downtown, because it shuts down such a large portion of the town. So I do think Steve's point is, hopefully you can trust in your officials that they're going to act reasonably, and it's been my experience that has been the way it is. And I can think of a few instances. For example, there's a block party every year on Edwin Lane, and they come to us, they talk to us about it, and they shut down the street, and we just make sure that they're doing it in a safe manner, and we let everyone from emergency services know what's going on, but we don't require them to do much more than make sure that they have barricades and cones and stuff like that. I did have the same question though about the $1 million binder. I was thinking of that group specifically, like how would they afford that, or would we need to? But it sounds like we have changed the language a little bit to say may require it, correct?
Yep.
Assuming no disagreement, we'll read it as may instead of shall.
Okay.
Or actually, we could take out that whole sentence and just amend it to at the bottom, so it doesn't seem as harsh. The licensing board at discretion may require additional conditions at no cost to town to include but not limited to an insurance binder, naming the town as an additional insured.
And then leaving police or, okay. Is there any disagreement to that? Okay. We'll consider that approved. Any other comments on point 7? Okay. Point 8, any public dance or ball to which admission may be had by the payment of a fee, or which the public may gain admission without payment of a fee, or a dance which is held as part of any other public entertainment, amusement, or exhibit.
The only reason why that would be in there is if in which dances aren't as big as they used to be, is if you had dances in a police detail was necessary.
Okay.
Sometimes they, especially when they're younger, there tend to be fights because Susie didn't want to dance with Johnny, but wanted to dance with Cliff. And then they start having issues. But that's the only reason, and especially if it's not run by the school. So I don't have an issue with it being deleted. I don't think it's an issue.
I guess I feel like when we look at this, any public dance or ball, I mean, we could go with an annual license for example, the Rockingham Ballroom, but I mean, I feel like point 8 might be just a bit superfluous or unnecessary at this point. I mean, I don't know if anybody else disagrees with that or agrees with that. I feel like if we're already licensing the business, maybe not necessarily have it as a separate point. I can't really think of any other venues that we'd have in town where we're holding large public dances or balls. Counselor?
I mean, I guess I could see where this could apply to any venue, not just necessarily to dances or balls. I completely understand if there is such a large event. I mean, I don't know where this would happen in Newmarket, but if there was such a large event that it would require a police detail, then that's just it's a whole nother argument, right? Like, I don't think it's really covered in this anyway.
Yeah, right. The only place you'd get is maybe say if all of a sudden something happened in the mills, or heaven forbid mill space ever went under, and you had that space wide open, and somebody goes, well, I'm going to lease it to have a nightclub in there, or that's when you would have the issue. I think it's, I think it's fine to I think it's fine to delete it.
Is it easier to have, because I guess, I mean, when I read this, I'm wondering just in general where we're getting the ability to permit or license a place like Stone Church or a place like the Ballroom.
State law allows us, and
Yeah,
and it's
but it doesn't.
and I understand.
I'm not going full
constitutionally been held up.
libertarian.
Yeah,
No, it's okay. I'm
yeah.
not bringing a morality point here. I guess I'm asking is like not seeing it in this ordinance, but we don't necessarily need to say 0.8 and any venue where individuals gather indoors to play music and dance and have a good time or like a club. We don't have to have that language in here.
Is that a question or a statement?
I'm asking you. Sorry. I guess okay, because we're putting here, or it originally reads any public dance or ball to which admission may be held. But then it got me thinking, like, I think sometimes Stone Church charges for like tickets to go see a band, but it's not necessarily a ball or a dance. But I mean, they're gonna go to a show.
That's now covered in number 5,
Okay.
where it says amplified music and event public is invited to pay.
Well, amplified outdoor music.
Right, and that was the point. You guys, we wanted to get rid of the indoor factor.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure because I think with public dances or balls, that's strictly an inside event,
Yep.
unless like we took over the golf course, for example.
Yep, but that's, yeah, I think
Okay.
that's why.
No, that's why it was getting me a bit curious.
Yep.
Does anybody want to keep 0.8 in here? Or are we okay striking it? Okay. Not hearing any disagreement for striking it, so we'll read that as changed. I think under permits, it really only leaves the solicit funds for charitable purposes line that we still have to circle back to. Bear with me just one moment. I don't know, I'll say it's a little awkward for me with the solicit funds for charitable purposes, because it seems like it's the only one where everybody's going to have 100 different viewpoints on, whereas everything else is pretty straight through, where it's mostly events.
And the issue is it works in other municipalities around us.
Mhm.
I don't know. I guess that's my confusion is I don't, again, like if you look at the Dover City Council agenda, they'll have a consent agenda and there's like 30 tag days or raffle permits or different charitable things that they're doing because they want, they know they have to go register for it. And again, it's not, you're right, we're not going to stop a GoFundMe. We're just asking that if you're going to be doing something publicly and asking for public funds, that you check in with somebody in the government to say, yes, we're a legitimate thing. So if you're not one, we can go and stop it. And I understand what's legitimate, but it's at least you can say, yeah, well, somebody will hear you and and now we have an appeal process. So if we don't agree, they can appeal to the town council. I think that's the only thing that's there. I think it's the, I mean, my suggestion would either keep it as is or get rid of it totally.
Councilor Brayback.
I think part of why it stands out to me is that it seems like it's different than everything else. Like the other items seem like they need a permit more from like a physical safety perspective, right? We don't want cars driving into banners or like traffic and the streets are closed and like more of crowds gathering. And this is more about like individual people's financial security. You know what I mean? It's like a little bit different. I'm fine with keeping it in. I don't think it's that big of a deal, especially now that there's an appeal process. But I think that might be part of why it doesn't quite fit to me.
I think you voiced my concerns fairly well, because when I read it, it just kind of sticks out, and I just wasn't really able to verbalize why it's sticking out to me.
And just to jump in too.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I agree. I mean, I don't have a problem keeping it in. I think that my concerns are similar to, Steve will remember when we brought up the raffles. And
yeah.
So it's that, placing an undue burden on those legitimate small town kind of organizations that are always asking for money. So that's my concern. I completely understand. And that hasn't been an issue for the raffles over the years. So, so my concerns were not, I don't know if they were unjustified, but they haven't, we haven't seen an undue burden placed on like the
Right.
PTA.
And that was it. I mean, that was the one. And if you remember that wasn't even our call. We had to have that by law, that we have to have a raffle permit. So even if you get rid of solicit funds for charitable purposes, if somebody sells a raffle ticket, they still have to get a permit. I mean, and again, the only reason why is they want to make sure that the state wanted to make sure they're legitimate charitable organizations versus Mr. Smith just going to have a raffle of 50-50 every week and keep $50 in his pocket. So, which that's called gaming.
And for the record, I did know a guy back this was in the Berkshires when I lived in Western Mass, who got arrested and got in a lot of trouble for putting those canisters in a bunch of local stores and made a ton of money.
Right. And that's why I know everyone says, well, how often does it happen? It does. And it's one of those things where if we don't have the tools backing us when it does happen, it takes another step for us to do. And that's why we're asking. It's not because we're trying to hurt the legitimate people. We're trying to regulate those who may try to harm people other ways.
Yeah. Okay. So we're okay keeping point 1 in and putting in an appeal process directly to the town council. Mr. Town Manager, where exactly would that point lie? Would that be under section 133 or would it just form its own point?
Nope, section 18-29. Right after I said, all I added is one sentence at the bottom. It says, any individual may appeal the decision of the licensing board to the town council.
Got it. All right. Let's take a look. Let's move on to section 131 then, fees, because there were concerns about that as well. Actually, go ahead.
I think that's gone now because you're only licensing except movie theaters outside events.
All right.
Because you're not doing bands, you're not doing crack skulls, you're not doing, the library has a band all of a sudden indoors. The only thing you're doing are, and again, I don't think anybody's gonna, live music in all places, including, and we could just take out held, we can reword it to reflect the up above.
Okay.
Because it's not indoors anymore.
Yes.
Already changed
I'm not following.
Annual fee for $100 for dance or live entertainment held in all places, including restaurant, bars, and lounges. Well, that was because before you were doing it indoors. We can amend this to say outdoors. So again, if you're having, say if all of a sudden the Rockingham Country Club wanted to have a concert series outside, well, then they would have to pay. But if they want to have it inside, they're fine. Because outside, we want to make sure the noise and everything like that. But inside, we just don't care. So I think we just take out, we can even take out, it's maybe just as easy. Annual fee, I'll figure out the wording, but it's just because it's going to be outside only.
Okay.
And the daily fee is if you're going to have a one-time thing and it's for profit. And I think that's the thing we can too. We can put there in for profit. Does that sound legit?
So daily fee, a license for any for-profit event?
I would say both.
All right.
And I think that speaks to one of John Kuiper's concerns about, regulating outdoor weddings or
Right.
The graduation party and that sort of thing. Although I will say, having had an outdoor wedding on my property, I mean, it was a long, long time ago. But there are, some concerns that people have to take into
Absolutely.
account. And so, I mean, I know no one questioned whether or not people were parked along the side of Ash Swamp Road that night, but I have had other events where we have been told, you know, you have to move your cars.
Right.
And I know other people on Ash Swamp Road have had a similar situation. And so, you know, we live on rural roads, and there does need to be some, I don't know if it's a permit or not, but some way to clear that with the powers that be, so that your wedding isn't shut down, because that would suck.
Yeah, and we were never, and this was never to do weddings, that we knew that.
Right.
It was for the other large events. Again, when I was in Northampton, there was a guy who had a barn and it wasn't being used, and he let his buddy just have concerts there. And it was even in the right zone, because one of the things, like, they put in was it agritainement or whatever they call it, the agritourism. So you're allowed to have entertainment things at farms. But the problem was there wasn't enough parking. There was all the other farmers, the other agricultural people were not happy with it. And there was nothing we could do. So that's one of the things that you would look at. That's why you look at it that way too. So, but it's, you know, if we're looking for outside only, that's why we can do it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put each applicant representing a for-profit entity shall pay in advance for such licenses as follow. Annual fee: a yearly license may be issued for an annual fee of $100 for outdoor dances or live entertainment, or held in all places outdoor, including restaurant, bars, lounges, or whatever, and shall only apply the ordinary and unusual entertainment referred to in the license. And again, we're not, this sexual explicit dancing doesn't count. We have to put that in.
Mhm.
And the daily fee will do the same thing.
Okay.
And one other question about that: would the board have the ability to waive the licensing fee, or the town council for that matter? Because one of the things that I was going to suggest, had you know, we gone through it.
It does. It does say unless specifically waived by the licensing board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because, you know, in like for 2021, I would suggest that we waive all fees.
Yeah.
because of the
Yeah.
pandemic.
Yeah.
I noticed that the language is just under daily fee, unless
We
I
can
said
add
it
it.
the way. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion on fees? All right. 132 expiration.
That's in the law.
Simple. Yeah.
That's
And
in
that
the state law.
we discussed.
Yep.
133 application and permits.
I don't think there's any comments.
No, I think that's all just standard.
Yep.
Okay. 134 penalty: any organization, any person, organization, or corporation who violates any provisions of this chapter shall be fined not less than $100 for each offense.
We get state law.
All right. And I guess because we're only looking at outdoor live entertainment events, we don't have to worry about the folks who have a wedding or something similar, like anything like that.
Well, and again, that's why we didn't want to have a noise ordinance, because if you had a noise ordinance and they got the complaint and the police officer thought, you know, if say they were making so much noise after 10 p.m.,
Mhm.
they would have to either warn them or then come back and give them the fine.
Okay.
Versus now they can say, hey, it's their judgment that they need to stop. And again, and the problem is you have Mr. Smith doesn't like Mr. Jones, so they keep complaining about the noise, which, I mean, Lieutenant Jordan can tell you that happens more often than not. You'd be surprised how many neighbors do not like each other. And they just will call the police every time there's even a civil matter. So that's why we didn't want to get into the noise ordinance versus trying to do something like this.
Okay. I don't think we need to discuss 135
Yeah, that's just,
or takes effect.
Yep.
Document as a whole, pending Steve's changes, seems better, I'm guessing. I would hope that in bringing this to the town council for a third reading, that this goes somewhat better. I know that there was a lot of concern on both sides from particular business owners and some residents in town that perhaps were skirting the issue by not just doing a blanket noise ordinance. But again, I really do agree with Steve that just pinning a specific number or decibels or related is just not the way to do this. That there's a better way, and you know, this does capture a bunch of other things into one neat little bundle. But I am hopeful that if this passes by the town council, that it does give us a good path to move forward, so we can help address some of the complaints that were coming in. Steve, moving from this meeting, there's a third reading with the town council, so you will just present the changes to the town council?
I have to look at the agenda again. I
Okay.
believe you made a motion to table. If you made a motion to table, what would happen is somebody would need to make a motion to remove the item from the table. And then I would suggest that we hand this out as an addendum and say, and I will have a red line version, say, these are the amendments
Mhm.
that were made. I don't think any of these are substantive enough to to have another hearing. But I think that's the way you'd have to do it. I've just got to double check the agenda.
Yeah. To my recollection, we did move to table. I only had one concern with pulling it from the table. I think every counselor voted to keep it tabled, but that we
No,
don't need
no.
anybody to have voted against.
No, it's not
Okay.
reconsidering. It's another motion to remove from the table.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
All right. Unless anybody has any closing comments, concerns, or items that they wanted to work on for this meeting, let's go ahead and say that we're going to recommend that the town council adopt the language as presented by the town manager at the next meeting, assuming it is able to go before the town council.
Yep.
All right. All in agreement? Cool. Okay. I'll consider us adjourned at 8:01 p.m. And I'd like to just thank everybody for making time this week so we can get this done.
Thank you.
Good night.
Everybody.